So, you want to buy a high-mileage Toyota FJ Cruiser. Well, let me go through everything you should know before and after you make that purchase. Hey there everyone, welcome to FJX 2000 Productions and another episode of Let's FJ. My name is Hayden, and because this is such an important topic, I'm going to be splitting this video into two parts. In this video, part 1, I will walk you through all the things you should look out for before you buy a used high-mileage FJ Cruiser. Then, in part 2, I will give my recommendations for what you should do after you've purchased your new to you, but used FJ. I do have videos on my channel discussing all the changes made to FJs between 2007 and 2014, as well as videos talking about the good and the bad when it comes to FJ Cruisers. So keep those in mind if you are currently on the hunt for your own FJ Cruiser. But in this video, we are specifically looking at those high mileage FJs. A real quick thank you to everyone for your continued support. Let me know in the comments below if this video helps you in your research before purchasing a used FJ. And if you like what you see, consider leaving a like and subscribing to see more FJ Cruiser content, as well as be in the loop when part 2 drops. You can also check out my Instagram at FJX2000 for updates on my own FJ build and adventures. But now, let's get started. The FJ Cruiser was first available for purchase starting in March 2006 as the 2007 model year. From then until 2014, the FJ Cruiser was available here in the US. Other markets didn't receive the FJ till later years, and likewise other parts of the world had the FJ until 2023. It has always been a unique and controversial vehicle, but is loved the world over by those who owned them and wanted a functional, simple, and dependable off-road vehicle. With the FJ now being discontinued, your only options for purchasing them will be in the used auto market. I see FJs going up for sale weekly on my local classifieds, and it's been interesting to see the market shift. For the longest time, FJs have held their value remarkably well, and only recently are we starting to see them become more reasonably priced. You may see the prices of used low-mileage FJs still bringing in a pretty penny on sites like Bring a Trailer. But if your local car dealer has a used FJ for sale and it's running in the 100,000 to 300,000 mile range, what things should you be looking for? First, let's talk about the body and frame. The number one hidden killer of the used FJ world is their frame. Rusted frames are unfortunately found on many FJ Cruisers, especially ones used in the Rust Belt. So if you see an FJ in person, make sure you are checking out the undercarriage to evaluate the rust. If you see an FJ online but the seller didn't post frame pictures or refuses to do so, move on. You're dodging a huge bullet. The rust on these frames can range from mild amounts of surface rust, which poses no real risk, to entire sections of the frame becoming rusted out to the point that holes begin to appear or components like rear suspension links break off. Make sure you're checking for rust first, then move on to the rest of the vehicle. Other cosmetic things to be on the lookout for with used FJs, aside from the common door ding or rock chip, would be faded paint, especially on the hood where it is the most noticeable. The front section of the hood, in particular, is plastic, not metal, and tends to begin peeling or fading with constant sun exposure. Along with rust, some FJ alloy wheels tend to corrode, which can become unsightly. And I also see the front and rear OEM bumpers often either have scratches or impact marks on the silver trim pieces, or may even be missing them altogether. I also commonly see the driver's seat becoming badly worn or even torn open from years of entering and exiting the vehicle. Other areas of the interior may also show signs of wear. I see the steering wheel often missing some of its silver paint, depending on how the previous drivers handled it. So just be on the lookout for small issues like that. For some people, these cosmetic items may not matter much, especially if they plan on modifying the vehicle by replacing or modifying used parts. But for others, every detail counts. The final cosmetic item I will mention is the windshield and surrounding trim. With the nearly vertical placement of the FJ's windshield, the thing is a rock chip magnet, so checking it for any potential cracks or chips may be helpful. And if the windshield has ever been replaced, check those window trim pieces. The trim around the windshield unfortunately must be removed for a proper installation, and most of the time, the windshield technicians do not do a perfect job with reinstallation. If the clips are not replaced or reinstalled properly, these cowl pieces or the upper window trim will fly off on the highway, so make sure they are properly seated and seam secure. Moving on to the mechanical side of things, let's start with the FJ's engine. Looking at an 07 FJ Cruiser, these things are coming up on their 20th birthday, and if they have been driven the national average of 12 to 15,000 miles a year, then these FJs will have about 200 to 250,000 miles on them by 2025. Therefore, it makes sense why so many of the used FJs currently for sale are in that 200,000 plus mile range. Luckily, with that Toyota dependability behind them, we are seeing FJs lasting well into the 300 and 400,000 mile range. I've even seen this photo online showing an FJ that has crossed over the 770,000 mile mark, meaning it's now likely over 750,000 miles. FJ Cruisers are built to last if they are properly maintained, so I wouldn't worry much about getting your hands on a higher mileage FJ, especially if it hasn't seen much off-road use. As long as you take care of it, and the previous owners have done the same, these things will keep on ticking. I think we will continue to see those average miles on used FJs rise as the years go on, and we will likely be pleasantly surprised by how long these things keep on trucking. But of course, with any vehicle that is used, parts will wear out with time. So if you get to test drive one of these high mileage FJs, be aware that steering and suspension components can start to show signs of their age, and I would try to feel for that during your test drive. Steering components like the tie rods or even the intermediate steering shaft will eventually need to be replaced. And since I off-road a lot, I've even had to swap out my entire steering rack. So as you drive, feel for any looseness or play in the steering. That may give you an idea of what future work or maintenance may be required. Expect the suspension to also be worn, especially if the FJ is still running stock shocks. While OEM replacements could be ordered if you're wanting to keep it stock, a suspension upgrade in the form of a new lift could also be a great refresh. Do note that as the ball joints and bushings get worn, especially on the lower control arms, you may need to replace the entire lower control arm, or LCA. However, the bolts that attach the LCAs to the frame, called cam bolts, notoriously get seized. Often, the only way to remove these seized cam bolts and remove the LCA is to cut the old bolts and reinstall all new hardware. So keep in mind that there may be some projects ahead, and if you are willing to do your own maintenance and repairs when things like that arise, a used FJ should be no issue. But make sure you have a trusted shop if you are taking it in for repairs, as the dealership would likely charge an arm and a leg for such jobs. Many people buy their FJs for their off-road or four-wheel drive capabilities, so if you're looking at used FJs, make sure that you are indeed buying a four-wheel drive model. There are a handful of two-wheel drive models out there, and you wouldn't want to accidentally buy the wrong one. Additionally, even if you do get an FJ with four-wheel drive, check to see that it has the other off-road features you may be interested in. If the FJ has a rear differential locker, you will see this button in the center console. If it doesn't, then not only does the rear axle not have a locker, but it cannot be added after the fact without a huge investment of time and parts. At that point, you'd be better off simply buying a different FJ with it already installed. But keep in mind that if the FJ does have the rear locker but no A-track switch, A-track or active traction control can simply be added with the addition of the A-track button, the easiest mod and upgrade on the whole planet. Back to high mileage FJs though, the user's manual recommends that one should drive the FJ in four-wheel drive for at least 10 miles each month to assure the front drive components are lubricated. So make sure during your test drive that you test the vehicle's four-wheel drive and its accompanying systems like the rear locker and A-track to ensure that everything engages and works properly. If the previous owner hasn't used them at all, then there's a chance parts may not work as they should. You could dodge a potential bullet by simply testing things out. When I bought my own FJ, for example, the rear locker didn't want to engage, and it turned out to be a faulty rear diff actuator, which Toyota had to replace. I doubt the previous owner had ever used it, so maybe that led to the problem. Hard to say with certainty, but just check those systems and save yourself a potential headache. If you're buying a manual transmission FJ Cruiser, do keep in mind that these FJs have additional parts that wear out and must be maintained. Throwout bearings, the clutch, and other components will become worn and need to be replaced. Also be aware that even the FJ's OEM alternator tends to go out around 100 to 150,000 miles. Mine lasted until about 120,000, so replacing that every 100,000 miles or so shouldn't be unexpected. Also keep in mind that most used FJs will not produce the same fuel economy as they would have new from the factory. Rather than getting the advertised 16 to 21 miles per gallon, exact estimates depend on the year and model, people generally report fuel mileage on the lower end of that or even less. I personally average in the 13 to 14 mile per gallon range, but then again, I do have a heavily modified rig with extra weight, larger tires, and lots of exterior accessories. All cars will become less efficient as they age, regardless of modifications, and the FJ is no exception. Not that FJs were ever built for great fuel efficiency, but I figured a heads up would be nice since you probably wouldn't find out how fuel efficient your FJ is until after purchasing one and filling it up a few times. Another thing to consider is that many FJs will have some degree of modifications done to them. It will be rare to find a bone stock FJ at this point, but typically many sellers who modify their rigs seem to think their modifications are the best in the world and will try to hike up the prices accordingly. A good rule of thumb is that previously installed mods will only be worth half their original value or less, so be wary of modified FJ price gouging. It's important to remember that while some aftermarket parts may be improvements over stock, other modifications will not last as long as the OEM parts. Even accessories like aftermarket steel bumpers and rock sliders can rust and start to chip, meaning work may need to be done to repowder coat and refresh some of these components to make them like new again. Even aftermarket lifts wear out and may be due for complete rebuilds or replacement. So while an FJ may look nice and built up at first glance, make sure to go over these modded rigs with an even finer tooth comb to determine if you're getting yourself into a money pit of maintenance down the road. Especially if the vehicle has lots of electronics added, not all wiring is the same. Inspect the existing wiring when there are add-ons like LED lights to see if things have been installed cleanly and professionally, or if there's a rat's nest of wiring waiting to give you problems. At the end of the day, however, I think if you can snag a clean FJ at a decent price, even if it has 150 to 250,000 miles on it, then you'll still get a nice long life out of it. With proper maintenance, FJs have shown that they are built to last. Now, of course, there will be a couple FJs that may have unique mechanical problems, but overall the quality and Toyota dependability is there. Even my own FJ is approaching that 200,000 mile mark and still runs like a top. Sure, I've had to replace parts here and there and perform maintenance as the result of using it for off-roading, but it still has a lot of life left in it and the value is still there for me. When you do decide to pull the trigger and buy yourself a used FJ, just be sure to do a little research and check what other FJ Cruisers in your region are selling for. Compare models of the same year and with similar mileage to determine the best deals. As with any car, the newer the better. So for North American buyers, if you can find one closer to that 2014 build date, you may be avoiding some of the quirky issues found on older models like the early 07 FJs. For more details on that, check out my FJ changes by year video. Also worth mentioning is when FJs were offered new from Toyota, they could come equipped with several different packages, including the Convenience Package, Off-Road Package 1 or 2, the Off-Road Package, or one of the Special Edition packages, just depending on the exact year. I have a write-up on the FJ Cruiser forums that covers all the FJ packages offered by year and may make a video about that in the future, but I will leave a link in the description below in case you want to check it out. I mention it because knowing that some FJs can come absolutely bone stock is important. Most FJs came with the convenience package at the very least, which gives you things you would simply expect to be included, like remote keyless entry, cruise control, a rear window wiper, and of course, the iconic mirror lights, as long as you're in the US. But some FJs have none of those things, so be on the lookout for those basic FJs, in case those mentioned features are things you could not live without. Additionally, packages like the upgrade package give you the exterior color keyed door trim inserts, which just make the FJ look nicer, along with other neat features like the rear power outlet, the triple gauge dash cluster, and the essential rear diff locker and A-track. If I were buying a used FJ, I would absolutely be checking for an FJ that has all these features, since an FJ without them would just feel incomplete to me. I just wouldn't want someone to buy an FJ and realize a lot of the features they thought were standard didn't come with it after all. And finally, let's mention the Special Edition FJ Cruisers. I have videos that dive into all the different models of Special Edition FJs, which you can check out on my channel. But when it comes to these used Special Editions, the common question I see is, are these FJs more valuable than other FJs, or should a person be willing to pay more for a used one? The answer is yes, but to a degree. Things to consider in that decision. For each year of the FJ, a limited number of Special Editions were made, so they are a bit more exclusive. For North America at least, only 6.5% of the total FJs sold were Special Editions. These Special Edition FJs always came with special badges, a monochromatic paint scheme, meaning the body and roof are the same color, and the Trail Team's models always came with blacked out trim for the bumpers, grille, mirrors, and door handles, unless you had a 2014 Ultimate Edition, in which case the grille was white. These special color schemes really helped them stand apart from the other white-roofed FJs with silver trim, and that alone may be enough of a reason for someone to purchase one at a slightly increased price. They also came with TRD wheels, improved suspension for off-road, and then all the features mentioned in the convenience and upgrade packages. So when you get one, you know you're getting all the bells and whistles offered by Toyota, and you won't be missing out on any of the essentials. But if you plan on modifying the FJ by replacing the wheels and tires and installing a lift, keep in mind that you're now swapping some of those parts that made it a special edition. If you're planning on modifying the FJ anyways, and especially if you plan on repainting it or wrapping it, then the extra price you may pay for a special edition is really a waste. Originally, the Special Edition package pricing was an additional $6,300 to $8,200 over the base price of a new FJ, but in the high mileage used market, I would only expect to pay about an extra $2,000 to $4,000 over what a non-Special Edition FJ of similar year and miles would be. But with that, I hope this video has given you plenty of information to think about and consider. Be sure to let me know in the comments if you have any questions, or if you found this video helpful to you. Again, remember to tune in for part 2 when I go over all the maintenance and recommended checklist items you should address once you've bought your used FJ Cruiser. But until then, thanks for watching, keep on FJ cruising, and until next time, take care.